The evening air was thick with tension, a tangible reminder of the past that had left deep scars on her heart. Aisha stood at the entrance of her childhood home in Lagos, her fingers trembling as they brushed against the familiar, peeling paint. Memories flooded back, each one sharper than the last. She could almost hear the echo of her father's voice, a mix of authority and disdain, cutting through the laughter of her youth. "Told you not to return, didn't I?" The words echoed in her mind, a haunting refrain of rejection that had followed her for years. It had been 12 years since she had severed ties with her family, a decision born from a mixture of self-preservation and anger. The day her father had publicly disowned her at her wedding, an act that had shattered her world, felt like a ghost that refused to fade. In that moment, as her heart thudded against her chest, Aisha knew she had to confront the shadows that lingered in the corners of her life. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside, the smell of dimness and nostalgia wrapping around her like a shroud. The walls, once filled with vibrant colors and family photographs, now stood dull and lifeless, just as her relationship with her father had become. She could hear her daughter's laughter from the garden outside, a stark contrast to the memories that suffocated her. "Mom," her eldest, Zainab, called out, her voice bright and cheerful, cutting through the suffocating gloom. "Come see what we found." Aisha forced a smile, masking the turmoil within her as she stepped into the garden. Her daughters, Zainab and the twins, Fatima and Jamila, were crouched by a small flower bed, their faces lit with excitement. They had discovered a hidden treasure, an old, rusted tin box buried beneath the overgrown grass. "Look what we found," Zainab exclaimed, her eyes wide with wonder. Aisha knelt beside them, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and sadness. These girls, innocent and untainted by the bitterness of her past, deserved a life unburdened by her family's history. As they pried open the box, a cloud of dust floated into the air, and the contents, a mix of faded letters, trinkets, and photographs, tumbled out. "Are these yours, Mom?" Fatima asked, holding up a sepia-toned picture of a young girl, a distant resemblance to Aisha. The sight stirred something deep within her, a reminder of the carefree girl she had once been before the weight of her father's expectations crushed her spirit. "No, sweetie," Aisha replied softly. "That was your grandmother, my mother." "Where is she?" Jamila asked, her innocent curiosity prompting Aisha to pause. She had shielded her daughters from the ugly truths of her past, but the questions were inevitable. "She passed away a long time ago," Aisha said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But she loved us, loved me, in a way that, well, she was kind." Aisha's mind drifted back to the woman who had been her refuge from the storm that was her family life. Her grandmother had filled their home with laughter and stories, teaching Aisha the importance of resilience and forgiveness. But even her grandmother's love had not shielded Aisha from her father's wrath. "What did your father do, Mummy?" Zainab's question jolted Aisha back to the present, the sharpness of her daughter's innocence contrasting sharply with the bitterness that had once clouded her heart. "Nothing we need to discuss now," Aisha replied, forcing a smile. "Let's focus on our treasure." But the box was more than just a collection of forgotten items. It was a portal to a past she could no longer ignore. Each letter, each faded photograph, held stories of pain, rejection, and, perhaps, hope. As her daughters continued to explore the remnants of a life long buried, Aisha felt an undeniable urge to confront her father, to demand answers for the pain he had inflicted. Would he even acknowledge her? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. Days turned into weeks, and the confrontation loomed over her like a storm cloud. The echoes of her past reverberated in her mind. She recalled the day he had disowned her, the humiliation and heartbreak flooding her senses. She had lost not only her father but also a part of herself that had longed for acceptance and love. It was time to reclaim that lost part. One evening, as she prepared dinner, Aisha found herself staring at her reflection in the kitchen window. The woman staring back was not the scared girl from years ago, but a mother who had fought against the tide of her past. She had transformed her pain into strength, raising her daughters with love and determination. "I won't let him take that from me again," she whispered to herself, a newfound resolve igniting within her. That night, Aisha penned a letter to her father, pouring her heart onto the pages. She spoke of her pain, the years of estrangement, and the weight of their shared history. She expressed a desire to confront the past, to find closure, and ultimately, to forgive. I forgive you, she wrote, the words flowing freely, releasing the burden she had carried for so long. But I need to speak to you. For my sake, for my daughter's sake. We can't keep living in the shadows of what once was. With a deep breath, she sealed the letter, addressing it to her father's home. As she dropped it into the mailbox, a sense of liberation washed over her. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of hope, a possibility that perhaps they could rebuild what had been broken. But would he even care enough to respond? The thought lingered as she walked away, her heart a mix of anxiety and anticipation. She had taken the first step toward healing, but the road ahead was uncertain. Days passed without a word. Aisha focused on her daughters, pouring love and attention into their lives. But the silence from her father loomed like a shadow, a constant reminder of the unresolved tension between them. One evening, as they shared a meal together, Zainab looked at her mother, concern etched on her young face. "Mom, are you okay? You seem sad." "I'm fine, sweetheart," Aisha replied, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about some family matters." "Family matters," Jamila echoed, her innocent eyes wide with curiosity. "Like the treasure we found." Aisha chuckled softly, grateful for her daughter's ability to lighten her mood. "Exactly, my love. We all have our treasures and our burdens, don't we?" Fatima nodded, her expression serious. "Can we help you find the treasure, Mom? The one that makes you happy again?" Tears pricked at Aisha's eyes. Her daughters were her treasures, the light in her life. "You already have, my dears, just by being you." As they continued to eat, laughter and warmth filled the room. But Aisha's heart still held the weight of her father's silence, a reminder that the past would not easily let go. The echoes of the past still lingered. The days turned into weeks, yet the silence from Aisha's father persisted. Each morning, she would wake up with a sense of dread mingled with anticipation, hoping for a letter or a call that never came. It was as if he had sealed their past within the walls of his heart, unwilling to confront the ghost that haunted them both. As the sun dipped below the horizon one evening, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Aisha decided that waiting was no longer an option. The longer she allowed her father's absence to linger, the heavier the weight on her heart grew. It was time to take the next step, to build a bridge over the chasm that had separated them for so long. Sitting at the kitchen table, she stared at her phone, her fingers hovering over the screen. What if she reached out directly? The thought made her stomach churn, but she steeled herself, reminding herself that vulnerability was necessary for healing. "Okay, here goes nothing," she murmured, her heart racing as she dialed his number. The ringing echoed in her ears, each tone amplifying her anxiety. Just as she began to second-guess her decision, the call connected. "Aisha." The voice on the other end was deep, laced with surprise. "Is that you?" "Father," she began, struggling to maintain her composure. "I wanted to talk. It's been a long time." "A long time indeed," he replied, the tone in his voice a mixture of warmth and tension. "What's on your mind?" Aisha took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on her. "I wrote you a letter. I poured my heart into it, and I hope you received it." "I did. I just needed some time to process everything," he admitted. "Process?" Aisha's voice trembled slightly. "You disowned me, Father. That wasn't just a disagreement. It shattered our family." There was a pause, heavy and suffocating, before he finally spoke. "I know, and I regret how things turned out. But I had my reasons." "Reasons?" Aisha interrupted, anger flaring within her. "Your reasons destroyed my marriage and left scars on my soul. I lost everything because of your actions." His silence spoke volumes, and Aisha could almost hear the gears turning in his mind. "Aisha, I was trying to protect our family's reputation. I thought you would understand." "Understand?" she echoed, incredulous. "You thought rejecting me would protect me? I've spent years healing from that rejection. It took everything in me to forgive you, to forgive everyone who played a part in my pain. What do you want from me? He asked, his voice softening. I can't change past. Aisha felt the weight of his words. I want to build a bridge to the future, Father. I want my daughters to know their grandfather, to learn from the mistakes we made. Another silence fell between them, but this time it felt different. Aisha sensed a flicker of hope in the air, a possibility that perhaps they could start anew. Can we meet? She asked, her heart pounding. Face to face? We need to talk about everything. Okay, he finally replied, his voice steady. Where and when? As they set a date for their meeting, Aisha felt a mixture of apprehension and excitement. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but for the first time in years, there was a glimmer of possibility. On the day of their meeting, Aisha arrived at the cafe they had agreed upon, her heart racing. The familiar scent of coffee and pastries filled the air, but her stomach churned with nerves. She spotted her father seated at a table near the window, his face lined with age and worry. The years had not been kind to him, and for a moment, she felt a twinge of sympathy. Hello, she greeted, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Aisha, he replied, a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. You look, well. She forced a smile, taking a seat across from him. Thanks. It's been a journey. I can only imagine, he said, his gaze drifting to the window. I never meant to hurt you. Yet you did, Aisha reminded him gently. We can't ignore the past, but we can learn from it. He nodded, a deep sigh escaping his lips. I've had time to reflect. I was wrong in how I handled everything, and I see that now. Then let's talk about it, Aisha encouraged, feeling the walls between them begin to crumble. What drove you to that decision? Why did you feel the need to disown me? I was afraid, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Afraid of losing control over our family. Your marriage. It felt like a rebellion against everything I had worked for. Rebellion? Aisha scoffed softly. I married for love, not to challenge you. I wanted a family, a life filled with laughter and joy, but your actions turned it into a battleground. Her father's gaze fell, shame washing over his features. I never wanted that for you. I thought by stepping in, I could save you. Save me from what? Aisha questioned, frustration bubbling to the surface. From a life where I could make my own choices. You pushed me into a corner, Father. I had to fight for my happiness, and in that fight, I lost so much. He looked up, pain etched in his eyes. I see that now. I was selfish, trying to protect our family's name at the expense of yours. Family is more than a name, Father. It's about love and support, Aisha replied, her voice softening. I want my daughters to know they have a family that loves them, even if it's complicated. I want that too, he said, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. I want to be part of your life again. The sincerity in his voice caught Aisha off guard, and for the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope flicker within her. Then let's start fresh, she suggested. No more secrets, no more judgment, just honesty. He nodded, his expression earnest. I promised to try. As they began to talk, memories of their past started to surface, but instead of hurt, they brought a sense of understanding. They shared stories of loss and regret, laughter and love, building a bridge over the chasm that had separated them for so long. In that moment, Aisha realized that healing was not just about forgiveness. It was about rebuilding connections, creating new memories, and allowing the echoes of the past to transform into a foundation for the future. The sun had barely risen when Aisha found herself awake, her thoughts swirling around the conversation with her father. The weight of their meeting settled on her shoulders, a mix of hope and anxiety. She had taken a significant step toward mending the relationship, but the journey was far from over. After dropping her daughters off at school, Aisha decided to spend the day reflecting on her father's promises. She wandered into the small park near her home, seeking solace among the vibrant flowers and chirping birds. As she walked, she couldn't shake the feeling that their conversation had opened a door that had been locked for far too long. Just as she settled onto a bench, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from her father. I've been thinking about our talk. Can we meet again? There's more I need to share with you. Her heart raced. This was the invitation she had hoped for, but the uncertainty of what he wanted to discuss made her hesitate. Taking a deep breath, she replied, yes, of course. When? Tomorrow. Same time. Sounds good, she typed back, her hands trembling slightly. The rest of the day felt like a blur. Aisha was consumed by anticipation, her mind racing through the possibilities of what her father might reveal. As night fell, she struggled to sleep, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. What more could he say? Would it bring them closer, or would it open old wounds? The next day came all too quickly. Aisha arrived at the cafe earlier than planned, needing a moment to gather her thoughts. She ordered a steaming cup of coffee and found a table in the corner where she could observe the entrance. When her father arrived, he looked different, more vulnerable, as if the weight of his past was finally catching up to him. He greeted her with a tentative smile and sat down, the air thick with unspoken words. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice low. "Of course," Aisha replied, feeling the tension in her chest tighten. "What's on your mind?" He took a deep breath, his hands clasped on the table. "I've spent a lot of time reflecting on my actions, on how I treated you and your family. It was wrong. I hurt you, and for that, I'm truly sorry." "I appreciate that," Aisha said, her heart softening. "But I need to understand why. Why did you think disowning me was the answer?" He nodded, his gaze dropping to the table. "You see, I was raised to value reputation above all else. I thought I was protecting our family's name by trying to control your marriage. I was blinded by pride and fear." "Pride?" Aisha echoed. "You allowed your pride to dictate our lives, and it cost us so much." "I know," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't see it then. I was consumed by the fear of losing what I thought defined us as a family. But family is about love and support," Aisha reminded him. "It's not about appearances or status. I had to learn that the hard way." He looked up, pain evident in his eyes. "I see that now. I realize I pushed you away when all I wanted was to hold on to you." Aisha felt a pang of empathy. "You have to understand, the decision to leave my marriage was not easy for me. I did it to protect my daughters, to give them a chance at happiness. Your happiness matters," he said, his voice steady. "I understand that now. I want to support you and your daughters, but I also want to ask for your forgiveness." Her breath caught in her throat. "You want forgiveness? After everything?" "Yes," he replied, sincerity pouring from his words. "I know it won't be easy. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I want to make amends, to be part of your life again." Aisha stared at him, grappling with the enormity of his request. The pain of the past still lingered, but beneath it was a flicker of hope, a chance for healing, a chance to rewrite their story. "Forgiveness is a journey," she said finally, her voice trembling. "It's not something that can be granted lightly, but I'm willing to try, for the sake of my daughters and for our family." His eyes glistened with gratitude. "Thank you, Aisha. I promise to earn your trust back. I want to be there for you and your girls, to show you that I can change." They spent the next hour discussing the changes he hoped to make in the ways he could be more present in their lives. Aisha listened intently, her heart cautiously opening to the possibilities. Each word he spoke felt like a small step toward healing, but she knew it would take time to rebuild what had been broken. As they left the cafe, Aisha felt a sense of lightness in her heart, a burden beginning to lift. They had a long way to go, but for the first time, there was hope for reconciliation. Later that evening, as she tucked her daughters into bed, Aisha reflected on the day's events. The idea of family, once so tainted by pain, was beginning to transform in her mind. Perhaps forgiveness was not just a gift she could give her father, but a path toward healing her own heart. The next morning, Aisha decided to take a leap of faith. She gathered her daughters and shared her plans to invite their grandfather over for dinner. "I want you to meet him," she said, her voice filled with determination. "He wants to be part of our lives." Her daughters exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of curiosity and caution. Will he be nice, Mama? Her eldest, Amanda, asked. I believe so, Aisha replied, her heart swelling with hope. He's trying to change. As the day of the dinner approached, Aisha prepared not just the meal but also her heart. She knew this would be a significant step for all of them, a chance to rewrite their family narrative. When the evening finally arrived, Aisha set the table with care, adding a bouquet of fresh flowers in the center. The scent of jollof rice filled the air, mingling with the laughter of her daughters as they played in the living room. When the doorbell rang, Aisha felt a jolt of nerves. She opened the door to find her father standing there, a bouquet of flowers in hand, a nervous smile on his face. Evening, Aisha, he said, his voice warm but shaky. Come in, she replied, stepping aside to let him enter. As they settled at the table, Aisha's heart raced. They exchanged small talk, and she watched as her father interacted with her daughters, his eyes lighting up in their presence. It felt surreal, a moment she had longed for but never thought would come. Thank you for inviting me, he said, his gaze shifting between Aisha and her daughters. This means more than you know. I want us to be a family again, Aisha replied, her voice steady. It's a long road, but I believe we can walk it together. As they shared stories over dinner, laughter echoed in the room, a sound that had been absent for far too long. In that moment, Aisha realized that rebuilding trust would take time, but with each shared moment, they were forging new connections, an opportunity to heal the wounds of the past. The weeks following their first dinner together passed in a blur of unexpected joy and tentative hope. Aisha's father, now a regular presence in their lives, made it a point to show up for family dinners, often bringing small gifts for her daughters, colorful dresses, books, and even a bicycle for Amanda. Aisha watched her daughters flourish under this new relationship. Their laughter became a familiar melody in their home, filling the void that had lingered for so long. Yet, while the joy was palpable, Aisha still felt a thin veil of tension that reminded her of the fragility of their new beginnings. One evening, as they sat in the living room playing a game of Scrabble, Aisha noticed her father watching her intently. She could sense a question brewing in his mind, something he had yet to voice. The game continued, but the atmosphere shifted. Finally, he cleared his throat, breaking the silence. Aisha, can we talk?